This administration is shameful. Y'all are a disgrace.
We're watching the fall of this administration.
What I think is interesting about this case, this story, is you can be highly legal.
Tensions are reaching a boiling point in the small town of Dune, Illinois, as a fierce political feud between Mayor Tiffany Henyard and trustee Kiana Beller takes center stage. The community is caught in a storm of controversy, marked by accusations, power struggles, and heated debates over the leadership of the local government. At the heart of the conflict is trustee Beller's outspoken criticism of Henyard's management, particularly her perceived lack of transparency. Beller has become the voice of those who believe the town's leadership needs to be more open and accountable, accusing Henyard of fostering an environment where crucial information is deliberately withheld from the public. Her calls for greater honesty and clarity have sparked passionate discussions among both residents and board members, transforming routine town meetings into increasingly tense affairs. The divide between Henyard and her critics is only widening. Supporters of the mayor argue that she is doing her best in a tough situation, pointing to the many challenges the town faces. In contrast, Beller's supporters argue that the lack of transparency is eroding trust in the local government, asserting that the town deserves stronger, more accountable leadership. As the conflict intensifies, Dune's once ordinary board meetings have become high-stakes events, with large crowds gathering to witness the next dramatic development. The community is deeply divided, with some rallying behind Beller's calls for accountability, while others remain steadfast in their support of Henyard. What's clear is that the political landscape in Dune is undergoing a profound shift. Emotions are running high, and neither side seems willing to back down. The outcome of this ongoing struggle for power and responsibility will undoubtedly shape the future of the town and could redefine its political dynamics for years to come.
Tiffany Henyard addressed her constituents.
The Thornton Township Supervisor and Dalton Mayor invited the community to Township Talk, where she responded to our report about her use of the township credit card by
The political climate in Dune, Illinois, reached a boiling point during a recent village board meeting, when trustee Kiana Beller focused her attention on the village's finances, specifically the expenses related to Mayor Tiffany Henyard's trip to Dubai. Known for her outspoken criticism, Beller raised concerns about the apparent financial mismanagement under Henyard's leadership. She questioned whether the village had a designated budget for such expenditures and pointed to the lack of transparency, suggesting that the mayor may have exceeded financial limits. The room grew tense as Beller pressed the issue, refusing to let it go unanswered. In response, the town's lawyer explained that the expenses were covered by a special event fund meant for occasions like the mayor's trip and did not require prior board approval as long as individual bills stayed under $5,000. Beller, unconvinced by the explanation, pressed further, asking about the apparent tactic of dividing event invoices into smaller amounts to keep them under the threshold. The lawyer acknowledged that while pre-approval was not necessary, the board could still approve the invoices retroactively, raising even more questions in Beller's mind. Not satisfied with the lawyer's response, Beller voted against the motion, criticizing the process as opaque and lacking accountability. She argued that it left no room for meaningful discussion or transparency. In contrast, Henyard defended the practice, claiming that the costs were within the approved budget and dismissing Beller's concerns as unnecessary drama. According to Henyard, handling issues behind closed doors had always been an effective and preferable approach to resolving internal disputes without airing them publicly. Beller, however, emphasized the need for open communication and accountability, suggesting that such matters should be discussed privately before being made public. Her stance only deepened the tension in the room as her words resonated with the audience, who murmured in agreement, further amplifying the unease. The clash between Henyard and Beller was far from resolved, and the political rift in Dune seemed to be widening with each passing moment.
There will be no comment, there will be anything that will be me addressing.
The real issue at the heart of Mayor Tiffany Henyard's increasingly turbulent administration is not just the financial controversies that have emerged, but the broader lack of governance and accountability that has defined her leadership. Henyard's time in office has been marked by questionable spending practices, a troubling lack of financial transparency, and an overall disregard for responsibility, which has fueled mounting frustration among Dalton residents. Many feel these issues run far deeper than isolated financial disputes and point to a systemic failure in the town's leadership. A recent village board meeting highlighted these concerns, particularly regarding Henyard's presentation of the village budget. During the meeting, resident Baylor expressed frustration over the budget being presented at an inconvenient time, 3:26 p.m., leaving the board with little time to properly review it. Baylor criticized Henyard for not allowing enough time for residents to examine the budget before a decision had to be made. She also called for a more detailed, itemized breakdown of the budget, a practice that had been standard in previous years. Henyard, however, seemed more focused on rushing the process rather than addressing these concerns. Her dismissive attitude toward transparency only served to heighten residents' frustrations and expose deeper issues within her administration. This disregard for open communication and accountability stands in stark contrast to Henyard's behavior when she was a trustee. As a trustee, she was known for her meticulous attention to the village's finances, often scrutinizing every detail and demanding financial responsibility, even in the face of budget constraints. She was particularly vocal about securing funding for tree care in response to resident complaints about overgrown trees. It is perplexing, then, that as mayor, she appears to have abandoned that same diligence in favor of rushing decisions through without proper oversight. Critics have pointed to this shift as a troubling double standard under Henyard's leadership. As a trustee, she was a champion of fiscal responsibility, but as mayor, her handling of the village's finances has appeared careless and irresponsible. This contradiction became even more glaring with the emergence of a recent credit card scandal. Henyard authorized tens of thousands of dollars in purchases on the village's credit card, yet failed to properly document or justify the spending. When the finance director claimed the credit cards had been deactivated the previous year, Henyard defended the charges, sparking further questions from residents like Baylor, who demanded an explanation. Tensions escalated when Henyard accused members of the village's board, including the finance director, of misappropriating funds. Her harsh accusations targeted board members and employees, escalating the atmosphere in the room. However, when Trustee Steve Beaver intervened with concrete proof that Henyard's team had access to the village accounts and authorized the questionable charges, Henyard refused to accept responsibility. Instead, she clung to a narrative of victimization, accusing her political opponents of attempting to undermine her authority and tarnish her reputation. Her refusal to acknowledge the truth only deepened the growing perception that Henyard was more focused on consolidating power and protecting her image than addressing the real issues facing Dalton. Residents began to realize that Henyard's priorities seemed to lie more in maintaining her political standing than in improving the community. This pattern of behavior has led to a significant erosion of public trust in her leadership. As public, dissatisfaction over her financial mismanagement, lack of transparency, and dismissive attitude toward criticism continues to grow. Many who once supported Henyard are now questioning her ability to lead. They wonder whether her administration is capable of steering Dalton toward stability, or if she is more concerned with protecting her personal interests at the expense of the town. With public trust in her leadership eroding and the gap between Henyard and the community widening, the future of Dalton's local government is at a crossroads. Whether Henyard can regain the trust of her constituents, or whether her time as mayor is coming to an end, remains uncertain. However, the damage to her reputation may already be too significant to repair.
Concerns in Thornton Township and a push to regulate what some call out-of-control spending by township.
The growing divide between Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the other trustees has become the most glaring and troubling aspect of the ongoing board meetings in Dalton. Henyard's increasingly assertive and combative approach has raised alarms as she reminds the board that they do not manage the daily operations of the village. This has sparked frustration, particularly from Trustee Kiana Beller and others who are pushing for greater openness, transparency, and collaboration. However, Henyard's harsh tactics have only reinforced the perception that she is more focused on consolidating her power than serving the people of Dalton. As tensions escalate, residents are becoming more vocal in their frustrations about how political infighting is hindering the town's progress. One resident, Daryl, expressed how disillusioned he and others are with the situation, lamenting that the town's most important issues are being sidelined by personal disputes. The media has amplified these concerns, with many citizens, including KS, arguing that the village's leadership should prioritize the public's interests over personal gain. They point to Henyard's extravagant spending and failure to foster cooperation among the board as major contributors to the ongoing dysfunction. Henyard, who once championed transparency and accountability, now seems to be avoiding these principles at all costs. This shift has left residents and board members questioning her motives and integrity. Beller's persistent demands for answers have earned her respect from some, but have also made her a target for Henyard and her supporters. The rift between the two continues to widen, and tensions reached a breaking point during a recent meeting. For Henyard, this conflict is about maintaining control and power in the face of growing criticism. She has repeatedly dismissed concerns and accusations, framing herself as a victim of personal attacks. For Beller, the battle is about restoring accountability and transparency to the village's leadership. The clash between the two has become emblematic of a larger struggle in Dalton, where municipal politics have spiraled into dysfunction and division. The crucial question now is whether Dalton can weather this leadership crisis or if the village will continue to repeat its past mistakes. The ongoing drama has drawn significant attention, and residents are anxiously watching to see how the situation unfolds. With both Henyard and Beller unwilling to back down, it's clear that the conflict is set to drag on for the foreseeable future. The board meetings have become spectacles of disorder, with each session growing more heated and chaotic than the last. More troubling, however, is how these disputes are exposing deeper issues with Henyard's leadership, such as unchecked power, poor financial management, and an inability to collaborate with those who should be her partners in governance. One of the most concerning aspects of the ongoing conflict is the lack of access to crucial financial records. Beller and another, trustee Jason House, have repeatedly been denied access to basic financial data needed to make informed decisions. Henyard's refusal to provide transparency has fueled growing concerns about her approach to governance. During a recent meeting, Beller raised the issue of payroll transparency, insisting that trustees should have access to payroll data to track where the money is going. Henyard denied any wrongdoing, claiming she had never instructed anyone not to share payroll reports. However, Beller's investigation uncovered emails showing that Henyard had, in fact, directed the finance director to withhold the payroll information. This revelation caused an audible gasp from the audience and confirmed that Henyard had obstructed access to basic financial records. Payroll transparency was just one example of a larger issue within Henyard's administration. During the same meeting, Beller highlighted the lack of credit card statements provided to the board, noting that it had been months since they had received any. Without this information, trustees were left in the dark about how taxpayer money was being spent. Henyard responded by claiming the credit cards had been revoked months earlier, yet Beller insisted on seeing proof, questioning why charges were still being filed despite the supposed deactivation. The growing financial mess and lack of transparency are becoming harder to ignore. Henyard is trying to manage the village's funds in ways that the trustees argue they never approved, and her consistent failure to provide legitimate documentation for these expenses has created a crisis of confidence among both residents and board members. The ongoing dispute between Henyard and the trustees has revealed not only deep divisions within Dalton's government, but also the broader dysfunction that has taken root under her leadership, her attempts to silence criticism, block access to critical financial records, and push dissent.
Tense moments in tonight's meeting. At times, Supervisor Tiffany Henyard took on her fellow trustees when it came to money and expenses, even accusing some of them of...
The ongoing discussions in Dalton are marked by a widening rift between Mayor Tiffany Henyard and the village's trustees. While Trustee Kiana Beller and her colleagues continue to push for transparency and cooperation, Henyard is determined to remind the board that they do not oversee the daily operations of the village. Her increasingly harsh and dismissive approach has reinforced the perception that she is more concerned with consolidating her own power than serving the people of Dalton. This has sparked rising frustration among residents, who are growing weary of the political gridlock and the lack of progress. One local, Daryl, voiced his disillusionment, expressing that Henyard is obstructing important tasks. Meanwhile, reporters have highlighted the belief among many citizens that public officials should work for the community's benefit, not personal gain. Local resident KS stated that Henyard's leadership has only worsened matters, pointing to her lavish spending and failure to foster cooperation within the board. Once known for her advocacy for transparency and accountability, Henyard now seems determined to avoid those very principles. While Beller has earned praise for her persistence in seeking answers, her determination has also made her a target for Henyard and her supporters. The tension between Beller and Henyard is palpable, and it's clear that the conflict shows no signs of resolution anytime soon. For Beller, the fight is about restoring accountability and trust in the administration, while for Henyard, it's about maintaining control in the face of growing criticism. For the residents of Dalton, this escalating saga is just another chapter in a long and unpleasant history of municipal politics gone awry. The crucial question now is whether the village can overcome this leadership crisis, or if it will repeat the same mistakes of the past. With the political drama showing no signs of slowing down, it remains to be seen whether Henyard can hold onto her power, or if her tenure will come to an end. Just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the ongoing clash between Henyard and Beller has taken on the feel of a reality show, with each new board meeting marked by heightened levels of chaos and dysfunction. The arguments between the mayor and trustees have begun exposing even deeper issues within the administration: unchecked power, poor financial management, and an ongoing power struggle that seems to have no end in sight. One of the most troubling revelations from recent meetings is the repeated denial of access to essential financial documents. Beller and trustee Jason House have continuously been denied access to critical data, preventing them from making informed decisions. The finance department has made it clear that they need Henyard's approval to release these documents, despite Beller's repeated requests over the past several months. This lack of transparency has led residents to question Henyard's motives and whether she's hiding something from the public. One of the most startling moments came when the issue of payroll transparency was raised. Trustees, who are responsible for approving spending, should have access to payroll information to ensure accountability. However, Henyard denied any wrongdoing, insisting that she had never instructed anyone not to share payroll reports. Yet, Beller uncovered something troubling in an email. Contrary to Henyard's claims, the finance director had been instructed to withhold payroll information. This discovery caused a collective gasp from the audience, as it confirmed that Henyard had obstructed access to basic financial data. The issue of payroll transparency is just one example of a much larger problem within Henyard's administration. During the same meeting, Beller raised concerns about the lack of credit card statements, noting that the board hadn't received any since May of the previous year. She rightly pointed out that if the village was paying bills, trustees should be able to see exactly what they were approving. Henyard, however, responded by claiming that the credit cards had been deactivated months earlier, and the town was no longer using them. But Beller, having reviewed the records, demanded proof of this claim. She questioned why charges were still being processed if the cards had supposedly been canceled. The absence of final documentation and the lack of accountability over these charges have only fueled doubts about Henyard's financial management. Beller's insistence on getting to the bottom of these issues has only highlighted Henyard's efforts to deflect responsibility. It now appears that Henyard is attempting to use village funds in ways the trustees did not intentionally approve, leading to a significant breakdown in trust between the mayor and the board. The situation in Dalton has reached a boiling point, with rising frustration among residents and growing concerns over the village's leadership dysfunction. Whether Henyard,